as you see, we have our slide up with some of the social media details. So we invite you to connect with both the National Summer Learning Association and CLAFA and Housing Is. And follow us on social media. So post any thoughts that come to mind during this session and use the hashtags summer learning, and we'll be sure to retweet. And we will begin the PLC meeting shortly. We are recording this, as you just heard. We're going to wait for a few more people to join, and then we'll get started. Thanks everybody for being here. We're going to get started in a few minutes, and we encourage you to see the slide up here to connect with both NSLA, the National Summer Learning Association, and CLAFA/Housing Is on social media. So you'll see all the tags and the hashtag. Post any thoughts, questions, ideas that pop up for you while we're talking today, and we will be sure to retweet or repost. And we are going to begin pretty soon. I'm just giving people another minute. And this session is going to be recorded, and we'll share the slides and the recording with you afterwards. And as we're waiting for everyone to join, I just want to remind everybody that this is a professional learning community meant to be like a peer exchange. So we do hope that you'll be willing to participate, speak up, take yourself off mute, all of those good things at the right time, and we'll make sure you know when it's the right time. All right, so my last reminder, so you see all the hashtags and everything, so please connect with us on social media, and we will repost anything that you post, any learnings that you'd like to share. We love to have everybody connected on social media too. All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. Annalise, I'm going to let you keep letting people in if that's okay. Okay. All right, so thank you all. It's really exciting to have you all here. And what we'd like to ask you to do is if you could rename yourself so we know who you are. So hover over your name and find the three dots, and you can add your name plus your agency or organization. That would be great. And then also ask you to introduce yourself in the chat. And I loved, just say who you are, where you're from. Put that in your name too, and then and I guess I should do that. I'm asking everybody else to do that, but I need to do that. So just like I just did, if you could add your organization next to your name, and then post in the chat. You introduce yourself, and I thought it'd be fun to share what's your favorite winter activity. So if everybody could do that, just kind of say who you are, where you're from, and your favorite winter activity. And as it says here, please use the chat for your questions and comments. And again, this is intended to be an interactive session. So we really encourage you to speak up, and you'll know when there is time for that. And we probably, if we have time, we're going to use a Padlet today too. So that's another place where you can share your ideas and reflections, but we really want to hear your voices too. And as I mentioned earlier, this session is being recorded, and a link to the recording along with the slides will be sent to everybody after the call. All right, so again, welcome. We're so glad that you're joining us today for the NSLA Professional Learning Community combined with the Housing Is OST working group focused on adolescent literacy. And we'll get more into that. in a little while. I'm Emily Samos. I am a consultant based in Washington, D.C. I've been working with the National Summer Learning Association for several years to facilitate this professional learning community for public and affordable housing leaders. And I love partnering with CLAFA. I think Abra is going to be with us shortly if she's not here yet. So I love working with Abra. I just to let you all know, I do a lot of work with lots of different organizations. One of my primary organizations that I work with is the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. And I know many of you are involved with the campaign with their Housing Honor Roll. So there's a lot of overlap there that is really great. And it's a really great opportunity for me to be able to work with both organizations. And I work with lots of different other organizations too. And I'm very excited for today's session to talk because I've been so interested in doing some of my own sort of digging into this idea of adolescent literacy and the ways that the pandemic has affected adolescent literacy. So yeah, I'm really excited to get into the content today. So do we have Abra with us yet?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Abra, hi. So I'll just ask you to quickly introduce yourself if you don't mind.
Yeah. So, and I heard all your intro. Thanks, everyone. If you're not on the East Coast, I was just moving from the office to home in anticipation of snow starting. So glad to have you with us. If you don't know me, I'm Abra Lyons Warren. I'm the director of Housing Is, which is a sub entity under the Council of Large Public Housing Authorities. I think everybody knows, if you're part of this working group, you should know Housing Is focuses on that idea that housing is that critical platform. It's the stability that individuals and families need to be successful. But it's not totally sufficient if we really want to improve life outcomes. So we're really pleased. This is a recurring sort of annual tradition of ours, but overall longstanding partnership with the National Summer Learning Association. In particular, they have a housing professional learning community as part of this out of school time work. So very pleased to have Emily leading that. In addition to this virtual meeting today, if you join us in person for our Housing Is Summit, which is our annual conference, and we'll be dropping a link for that registration in the chat, you can have an in-person meeting of this professional learning community. So I know lots of you have attended in the past. We'd absolutely love to see you again. We also adore seeing new faces, as well as with your partners, right? So the after-school programs you're working with, the summer programs you're working with, but really excited about the discussion that we have today, and also just appreciate all of you making time and space for this. I know it's been a tricky few weeks.
Yeah. And we are going to get a chance to connect around that. So thank you so much, Abra. And, I love working with Abra. So she and I actually put our heads together to come up with the sort of plan for the NSLA professional learning community for 2025. And we came up with the theme of multifaceted literacy. And in each of our quarterly convenings, we are going to look at different aspects and different kinds of literacy that you may incorporate into your programming for students and families. And so today, like I said, we're starting the year with adolescent literacy, and really looking at how you can engage middle schoolers and high schoolers in reading and writing activities during summer and OST programs. So before we get into our content today, I just wanted to do a quick refresher. I know many of you have seen this multiple times, a little bit of background on NSLA and the purpose of this PLC. So NSLA is really the only organization that's solely focused on advancing summer learning, and also on specifically closing the achievement gap through high quality summer learning experiences for all young people. And as you guys know, through the pandemic, this summer learning became very important, got a lot more attention, a lot more money. Of course, now we'll see what happens with all that. But so it's been a very exciting time for the Summer Learning Association. And obviously the vision is that all young people have access to high quality summer learning experiences to help them succeed in college, career, and life. Okay, so the purpose of their professional learning communities is, because they have several, there's about 11 different professional learning communities, is to empower and equip more programs at all stages of development and create deeper partnerships so for the goals are to regularly convene like-minded or people with similar positions from across the sectors. They are planned and facilitated, so they are quarterly by NSLA field consultants like myself. And again, so NSLA is not sure yet. As some of you have been to their conference in the past, they're not sure yet what they're going to do this year. So we're waiting to hear about that. But usually we have a longer session at their conference, and we obviously cover topics such as partnerships, virtual learning, racial equity, evaluation, program quality, and then today, adolescent literacy. And so really specifically, this is sort of our little blurb on the public and affordable housing PLC. You guys really meet youth where they are, and you strive to provide safe, high quality summer experiences in their community setting. And that we really believe, just like housing is, that this alignment of housing, education, and health can have a very, very significant positive long-term impact, long-term outcomes for those experiencing poverty. So that's kind of just the way we frame the PLC for public and affordable housing leaders. Okay, so introductions. I am very excited to have the chance to plan today. I'm excited to have had the chance to plan today's convening with two literacy experts, Dr. Simone Gibson of Morgan State University and Dr. DJ Bolger of the University of Maryland, along with our awesome peer from the San Francisco Public Library, Jess Ouyang, hope I'm saying that right. So I'm going to ask each of them very quickly to briefly introduce yourselves, and then we'll get the content going. So Simone, I'm going to ask you to go first.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Simone Gibson. I'm an associate professor at Morgan State University. I work in the Department of Teacher Education. And in that role, I do a couple things. But the most significant and most relevant to this conversation is that I train teachers, those who are trying to become teachers, or we call pre-service teachers, and in-service teachers, those who are already teachers, about how to teach their kiddos how to read and write. And I'm also the co-director of the Maryland Initiative for Literacy and Active MILE. And I'll be co-presenting today with my colleague, Dr. DJ Bolger. Thank you so much.
Thank you. DJ.
DJ Bolger. I am an associate professor at the University of Maryland. I am in the Department of Human Development and quantitative methodology, but we do a teacher prep for early childhood education / special education. But in my research life, I am a cognitive scientist, neuroscientist who studies reading and language in addition to doing classroom work. So I look at how the brain reads and learns to read and all that other good stuff.
Awesome. Thank you. Jess.
Hi, I am with the San Francisco Public Library. I am their youth development coordinator. So right now I'm responsible for the programs for youth ages 13 to 18. And I'll be talking a bit about what the public library can do as a partner for your OST programs.
And he has a wealth of resources that you can also use in your own programming. So I'm really excited. It's really great. We don't have time for everybody who's here to introduce themselves, but I just looked in the chat. We've got San Antonio, Chicago, Atlanta, Sacramento. So we're really, really excited to have you all here. And we are going to have time to talk with each other later in the session. Okay, so quickly, the agenda. We are really, really excited to get this group together to relaunch in 2025 as a professional summer learning community with housing leaders who are working to ensure that kids keep learning in the summer and creating equitable access to opportunities and resources that will keep them recovering their learning post-pandemic. We have a simple agenda today. So as you might recall, in the past, we have started with what I like to call Project Hot Takes, where you have the chance to share updates on your summer. But given the situation in Washington, which is where I am, it hasn't started snowing yet, but it's still crazy and chaotic. So with all the confusion and distraction it's causing all of us, and especially many of you who are operating with federal funding, we just want to take a minute to pause and acknowledge this and begin our session with what I'm calling a group check-in by asking you to answer a really simple question about thinking about your values and your beliefs, and what's one value that you've actually like put into practice in the past month in all this chaos and confusion. So after we have a little bit of time to do that group check-in, then we'll go into our topic for today with a deep exploration of what the research, including the recently released data from the Nation's Report Card, has revealed around adolescent and secondary literacy. And all of our guest speakers are going to share their knowledge, and we'll have the chance to, if we have time, you'll have time for Q&A with them. We may or may not have time to get to our peer exchange, but hopefully we will, so you guys can share your own feedback on your experience with adolescent literacy. So any questions about the agenda before we move on that you'd like to ask? All right, so we are going to get into our group check-in. So in the spirit of a true professional learning community or working group, it is time for us to engage in what I call the group check-in. So as I said, it's a confusing and chaotic time, and I'm sure it's difficult for many of you to even find the headspace to join us today. So now we have a chance to just check in with each other, and to do this, I'm going to ask you to speak up, put your camera on, take yourself off mute, and share your name, title, your organization, your geographic location, and then just 2 minutes to think about the past month and describe one value or belief that you have found yourself putting into action amidst the chaos and confusion that is coming from Washington as you're, whether it's as you're dealing with your who you're working with your colleagues, with yourself. But I'd love to make this kind of like an Ignite session. So you just like really quickly share your story. And, I know you guys, it's sometimes a challenge to speak up, but this is a chance to really, these are your peers. This is your professional learning community. So I am going to just say, who is brave enough to go first? Take yourself off mute, put your camera on, and just share, like, what is that one value or belief that you've put into action in the past month?
Start. I've really tried to give a lot of patience and grace because I think it's been very, very emotional. And I think, people had a lot of quick reactions last week. And I tried to remind myself it's a rough week. So I'm going to step back and not take it personally.
Patience and grace. I love that. Anybody else?
My name's Lindsay Karras. I'm with Mercy Housing, and I would say as we're working with young people during this time, safe spaces where they can explore their emotions around this.
It's more important than ever. Absolutely. Thank you.
Hi, hi, my camera doesn't work. It's Robin Hickey, School Biz Match. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I agree with Mercy, or with Lindsay. How is our new administration treating children? That's all I really look for. Or what are their actions that they're taking in other areas going to impact our children and families?
Thank you.
Plain and simple.
Others, just thinking about like beliefs and values you've put into action as you're sort of managing your own reactions and emotions.
Hi, this is Jessica. I'm from Atlanta Housing. I'm having a little bit of issues with my camera right now, so you can't see me. However, I guess one thing, like someone had mentioned previously, is patience, grace, because we don't know what the unknown is, what the unknown is going to be. With this new administration, it's kind of up in the air in terms of funding, about what may happen in the future for our programs. So kind of just waiting it out and having some patience and grace during this
Thank you,
process.
Jessica.
Hi,
Yes.
Jen Carter from Vancouver Housing Authority in Vancouver, Washington. And for me, it's really been about investing and focusing on local community. Like, how do I find those people near me? How do we pull each other in and do the work locally to secure each other?
Thank you, Jennifer. And I will say one thing that we've been saying at the Campaign for Grade Level Reading is we're saying that communities are the shock absorbers, meaning like communities are still pushing forward. You guys, I mean, I'm getting chills right now thinking about this. You're still pushing forward and doing your work every day. So we're so grateful for that. Anybody else?
Hey, it's Bonnie Howard. I'm with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. And I would say I am trying to practice self-care. And in my self-care is knowing when to step away when I actually can't take anymore. And just trying, really trying to limit how much of the information is kind of coming all day and every day. So trying to just protect myself.
It's so important too. So important. Anybody else? And if you missed it, you know, the slides up here, but we're just saying, we're just doing a group check-in, asking like, in all the confusion and chaos that we've all been experiencing in the past few weeks, what's like one value or action, or one value or belief that you feel like you've put into action that's kind of helped you in the past month?
I'll go. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Andrea Rankin. I'm with Columbus Metropolitan Housing. And although I don't provide direct services to the residents, one thing that I have put in place since all of this craziness and chaos has been going on is to just not make assumptions and to make sure that I am really taking in the information and time to digest it in a way that makes the most sense, and just trying to remain level-headed through all of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Anybody else? Well, anybody, just one more minute for anybody else that wants to share how you've been putting your values into action, your beliefs into action, taking care of yourself.
Hi, it's Alice from the Seattle Housing Authority. Nice to meet you guys. One of the things that I personally value in my role here at SHA Seattle Housing is to create an environment where one can show up as themselves and they feel like they can reach their full potential. And in times like this, I think we're called to be more of that and create more of those safe spaces for people to know that they can still show up as themselves and reach and meet their full expectations and potential.
I mean, I really feel like I'm gonna like, I could easily burst into tears. Thank you. Because it's so important what you guys are doing. So important. Thank you. Anybody else? Well, I can't thank you enough for sharing your ideas. And it really, like, again, it's, you know, I get the New York Times headlines and it's like unbelievable how many times a day there's something else. So being able to hear from all of you, it's made me feel just a little bit more positive, more optimistic. So thank you so much for sharing that. And now we're going to shift in. We're about to hear from our two doctors that we have with us today, our two PhDs, and then Jess, our great colleague from San Francisco Public Library. And so what I do, we did set up a Padlet, and I'm going to ask you as you're listening, I'm going to post this link in the chat. If you want to go ahead and fill in, let me get my chat. Where's my chat? Oh, there it is. Okay. Oh, weird. There it is. Okay. So posted that in the chat, and I'm just going to open this right now so we can all see this. Wait, let's see. Okay. Can you all see the Padlet?
Yes.
So it's just a couple questions. So as we hear from our great speakers, if you want to post in here, what is your experience with literacy, reading and writing programming for teens? What is your greatest challenge in this program? What is one way you have tried to address this challenge? And what other tips do you have for successful adolescent literacy summer or OST program? So it's just a way for you to kind of share your best practices and your ideas related to the topic that we're going to be hearing about and really digging into. So, you know, as long as it's not distracting you from listening to our great speakers, if you can just take a few minutes to jot that down, and we'll see if we actually have time to come back to work on this together. If we don't have time, at least you kind of can share your ideas this way and you can all see each other's ideas. Okay, so back to our slides. Let's see if I can do this. Here we go. And view slideshow. Okay, so now, so yeah, I mean, you guys probably have all used Padlet before, but you click on the plus sign under each question and add your name so we know who wrote it, if you could please. And then again, we'll come back to this later. Okay, so I'm very excited to ask you to please give your full attention to our featured speakers for today, our awesome guests from both Maryland and San Francisco. And if any questions pop up, in addition to adding your ideas to the Padlet, if any questions pop up, please feel free to post them either in the chat or the Q&A. We'll keep our eye on both of those, and then we'll have time for questions afterwards. So I am super excited to get the chance to learn from our two experts in literacy. So Simone and DJ, please tell us a little bit about your work and about the Maryland Initiative for Literacy and Equity, and what the research is telling us about the current state of adolescent and secondary literacy. And Jess, we're going to ask you to follow right after with SFPL's work in this area and your best tips for our colleagues on the line who are planning summer learning and OST programs and how they can incorporate literacy into their teen activities. All right, so Simone and DJ, take it away. And you can just say next slide when you want me to advance.
Okay, Simone, do you want to start, dude?
Indeed. Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Simone Gibson. I am the co-director of MILE, the Maryland Initiative in Literacy and Equity. And you're going to hear in a moment from my colleague, Dr. DJ Bolger. We're going to chat just a little bit about and share some insight about literacy on the secondary level, and hopefully share some insight that you will find particularly relevant to the kids that you are engaging in our school.
Simone, I'm just going to interrupt you you're a little bit hard to hear. I'm not sure what's.
Okay, let me try that.
It's like a little mumbled, a little jumbled.
How about this? Is this better?
Oh, much better. Much better.
This is better?
Yes.
Okay. So you'll hear from us just speaking a little bit, hopefully about some insight in terms of ways of best supporting your adolescent readers in out of school time. We're going to start the conversation by learning a little bit about the brain and reading, just to kind of orient some of the conversation that I'll follow up with as it relates to in practice what this looks like in best practices and what to listen of your adolescent.
Next slide.
And MILE, really quickly, was started a little over 2 years ago. It's actually DJ's brainchild, so I don't know if we have time, we can chat about that a little bit, but essentially, there are not a ton of programs that are engaging the kind of energy and time that both UMD and Morgan are in understanding how do we train teachers in evidence-based literacy practices. And so this is something that we shared in common, but we also shared in common a real passion for ensuring that all of our readers, especially those from some of our marginalized and just marginalized groups in general, we wanted to make sure that reading conversations are specifically targeting and focusing on those populations. So we've got funding through the University of Maryland with an initiative that was established with the president of the University of Maryland, and we've been rocking and rolling ever since. This is mine. And if we can go to the next slide. And I'll turn it over to you.
So these are, I'm sure everybody saw last week, there was a release of the NAEP data, or I don't know, maybe you may not have seen it, but those of us who are ensconced in literacy, this is obviously something that we look at every year, every 2 years when they come out. So this is the most recent NAEP scores, the National Assessment for Educational Progress, the nation's report card, if you will, and of these assessments, right? We look at the way that scores have gone over the years, and obviously there's a lot of discussion of things that have happened because of COVID and the shutdown from the pandemic, and so we saw a decline into 2022. And so the question about the 2024 scores would we see a recovery from the pandemic, or would we see a continuation of decline? And so what you see here, and I'll show some overall scores, is that obviously there's been a continued decline, and that decline, as you can imagine here, is just looking at, you know, what the different levels, you know, they break it down by, you know, the top 90%, you know, the 75th percentile average, and so on and so forth. And what you can see is that those who are at the lower levels are continuing to decline, while the middle levels declined a little bit, or the higher levels declined a little bit, but it's really, you know, those who are struggling the most are now even at a larger struggle. And so this is one of the things that obviously concerns us. Now, I can talk about assessment and how assessment comes with its own set of caveats and things to understand. And when I look at tests like the NAEP and assessments like the NAEP, we have to understand their biases that may be implicit in them, and really understand that they're not diagnostic. They really are like a thermometer. You can tell that, yeah, something may be wrong, but you don't know if you know what is the root of the issue, and it could be in multiple places. And so if you go to the next slide, one of the things that we see here is what is, you know, who are those who are most affected. And so when we look at as we talked about, the populations who have the highest barriers to access and to resources, that those are the ones. So this is what you're looking at here is these are the lowest performers. The lowest level on NAEP is what we call below basic. If basic is the ability to locate information in a text and identify a main idea and interpret the meaning of a word as it's used in text, this is below that. So these readers are not able to achieve even those levels, right? So what you see here is these are the percent of children in 8th grade by group who are scoring at that below basic level. And these levels have generally, like I said, I want to say, been not much different over time. Obviously, some increases in percentages, but really these numbers haven't improved over time, as you can imagine. Next slide. And just to give a sense of, these are the types of questions that are asked. So, and what categorizes what is below basic, what versus what is considered basic and proficient. And what we can see here is, you know, compared from 2022 to 2024, I mean, you see large decline, or the declines in performance are really generally at the middle and higher levels, but yeah, I mean, there are even some issues even at the below basic level. Next slide. One of the things that we really try to impress upon people, and there's been a lot of discussion and of what we call the reading wars. You know, I really started in the field just before the National Reading Panel in the 90s, and was really kind of embedded in the reading research and how to get kids to learn to read back, you know, in that era. And I've seen the all of the tug of war that happened before that and ever since. And one of the things that it's really important that I like to impress upon people is reading is not natural. We might talk about language as being natural and something that we are predisposed to do, but reading is difficult. And written language is much more complicated than spoken language in many ways. And one of the things I like to point out is that when we speak in sentences with our friends and every day, we tend to speak in very subject, verb, object sentences, you know, that are quick and easy to understand. When you get into written language, you get into a whole complexity of syntax. Those of us, you know, who are in academics, our sentences go on for lines and lines and lines. Sometimes probably not, you know, it's a criticism of academics, I guess. But written language is more complex than spoken language in many ways. And I can talk about for hours about the importance of written language, because written language frees us. It, you know, I usually use the the Douglas quote of, once you learn to read, you'll forever be free. But reading really does liberate us in so many ways. And so in our communication, it frees us because we're able to speak through space and time. But it is an advanced cognitive skill that is really difficult. Next slide. And so reading, one of the things I would like to say is reading is brain science. Louisa Moats, who's known for back in the National Reading Panel days, is former president of the International Dyslexia Association, and really spent her career trying to educate people about how to teach reading. She talked about reading as being rocket science. It's difficult. And like I said, as a neuroscientist, I like to say reading is brain science. And when we think about reading and literacy and writing, there's so many different aspects of language comprehension that are there, our background knowledge, our vocabulary, those language structures that I just spoke of, verbal reasoning and knowledge. But then there's the parts of just, breaking the code that's on the page. And I know there's probably, those of you who are familiar with the reading wars know that a lot of this back and forth has been about, word recognition and phonics and those types of things, but it really is building all of these skills together. And if you click the button, just advance. Yeah. Just right click. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So anyway, there's animation. Sorry. Right, all of these different skills are on different parts of the brain. So in the frontal, a lot of those red things take place between frontal cortex there, that big blob that you see towards the front of the brain, while the blue stuff tends to happen towards the back of the brain. And it really is, when we're reading, it's those two areas working together that really come about. And so you can hit the button again. So you probably just hit it a bunch of times. There's a bunch of little things. And so this takes place in a classroom with a child, right? And all of that, right? They have a race and ethnicity. They have a family and a culture that has assets of how they think. They have a language that they come with, and not just, right, a dialect that they come to the classroom with. And all of these factors play a role in how they learn and how they learn to read, as well as these social factors like the adverse experiences and the toxic stress that they may be facing as they are trying to learn. So these are all important to the context of learning and peer relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So, and quickly, yeah, you can click the button twice here. One of the things that we see is that this is just an example of interventions that happen during the summertime. So this is as an out-of-school network, and this is results of a summertime intervention with struggling readers, those who are at the lowest levels of reading. And this was done with a range of kids, both from high economic status and low economic status in Boston. And one of the things that we see here is that those who actually responded most to the intervention, it was the kids who were actually had the highest barriers. Those who were from the lowest economic classes that actually had the highest responses of intervention. And so what we see is summer tutoring. These summer tutoring programs have an impact on the brain. These results that you see here of the brain are those largely, like I said, from those who are those children in low economic settings. And so those are the ones who really benefit heavily from these types of summertime tutoring, summertime literacy clinics.
So
And I'll turn it over to Simone.
So we can chat just a bit about some of the implications of this.
And Simone, you're a little muffled again.
Okay. Am I still muffled now?
A little better.
It's a little better, but still not good.
Yeah, still a little muffled.
Okay. How about this? You can hear me? Okay, so let me say, I can't hear y'all when I'm in this mode, but it's okay. I'm gonna just chat. So just, I don't know, give me some sort of indication, shake your hands or something if you need me to stop or have a question. Okay, so couple of factors that y'all want to be aware of, and some of y'all know this, but for some of you it may be new. First of all, congratulations to y'all. Like, hats off to y'all. Maybe not congratulations, but hats off to y'all for the work that you're doing. There is a connection between education and pretty much everything, but we tend to focus on education and reading in isolation, right? And the idea that you all are working with housing and out of school time activities for the families that you work with, I think it's awesome. So there's that. In terms of some factors you want to be aware of as you're thinking about programs for some of your middle and high school kiddos, right? One involves messaging. And it seems real simple, but it's a really heavy lift. And DJ mentioned this. Reading is not easy. And reading is not about intelligence. I have a girlfriend, her child was reading, I think 3-4 years old. And she was like, little Simone is so smart. Yes, I'm sure Simone is really smart, but reading fundamentally is not about how smart you are. It's about how much exposure you've had. And there's a small group of folks who read real easy, but the vast majority of us need a whole lot of help and a lot of intentional and explicit help. So for the folks that you are working with, who are working with your middle and high school age kids, that's a really important messaging, because often what will happen, especially for our struggling readers, they come to our classrooms and they come to our programs and they are saddled with this burden of not being a good reader. And that burden results in them seeing themselves as not intelligent. And if they see themselves as not intelligent, there are all kinds of consequences to that. So just the messaging around, and you heard DJ talk about the brain a bit. Reading is not about how smart you are. It's about how much exposure you have to reading. It's kind of that simple. So that messaging in itself is really, really important, but too often missing from these conversations, not only in schools, but also in programs taking place outside of school. Furthermore, there's this idea, it's called new literacy. It's this idea that we all read. It's just what we're reading may not be the things that are valued within schools. So just piggybacking on the idea that reading is not about how intelligent you are. We all read one way or another. It's just that the things that we engage with may not be what's valued within schools. For instance, most kids can text, they can create emojis. They may not necessarily be engaging with the traditional types of texts that are valued within schools, but they're reading signs, they're going to the grocery store, they're picking up snacks or lunch or, whatever. They can read. It's just that, again, sometimes the things that they can read and they're really, really good at reading aren't what's valued within schools. So as a means of bolstering the esteem of our kiddos, this is also potentially some really important helpful messaging for kids. Next we have working. If you can click it one more time, I think this got a lot out of whack. They're good. We're gonna rock and roll with it. Working on basic skills and critical thinking concurrently. So some may assume that if you're not a good reader, for whatever reason, you're not a good reader. And this is also really problematic for me. Y'all, when I was an 8th grade teacher, the smartest little boy I had in my class, his name was Shane. Okay. When I tell y'all, I don't think Shane could read much of anything. And I know this because during lunch, he taught me to be a better teacher. During lunch, he would copy from the assignments that we had in class before him, because I was doing the same. I didn't know any better. I was doing the same thing with all my classes. So he would come to class prepared. Super, super smart. But when I finally figured out what was going on with Shane, I realized, like, this kid cannot read, but smart as a whip. It is possible to not be a really good reader, but to be super duper smart. Again, reading is not about intelligence, it's about exposure. So as the folks you're working with are engaging some of our adolescent learners who may not be the strongest of readers, just bear in mind, you can still propose critical thinking questions and higher order thinking questions to these kiddos. And they're super smart. They just may not be strong readers. The two are not connected, but they should still be challenged as you are building up these foundational reading skills. And then last on this screen is growing vocabulary and complexity. You learn vocabulary in a whole bunch of different ways, but especially as it relates to text that you're providing students, like traditional forms of text that you're providing students, do some vocabulary work with them. So there are all kinds of terms for this, but I phrase this as pre-reading. So if I'm reading something and I know there's some words in here that my students may not know, we just take a few minutes and we talk about those words ahead of time. And if I really can, if I really got some time to know what I'm doing, we're gonna learn to break some of these words down into morpheme, right? Or the smaller units of understanding so that kid can make sense of not only these words, but words that look similar. But doing that front loading of that vocabulary work, so as students read, because we know what happens as they read, if they get to words they don't know, they're gonna do one of a couple things. They're gonna guess, or they're gonna skip it. Or they, so either way, that is not really great reading strategy if the goal is comprehension. So front loading some of these vocabulary words that your students may not know, it's just super duper helpful. And I don't mean just front loading vocabulary by telling them to look up some words in the dictionary. Let's stop that. Can we stop that? I don't know how many of y'all got stop vocabulary that way, but that's not necessarily the best way to teach kids vocabulary. So once we know what to avoid, what do we do? For starters, there's this concept in education called SCHEMA, SCHEMA. And it's the idea that kids learn, or just people learn a lot better and easier when what they know is connected to what they're learning, right? And this is getting to not only background knowledge about the text that you're giving to kids, but also some of that vocabulary. As much as you can make relevant connections between people's lives and exposures, it just helps make the text, it helps them to grab the text and to make sense of it a lot easier when you can start doing some of that front loading of making those connections for anybody really. Oh, chunking text. So chunking text is literally when we're working with folks who may not be as confident as readers, rather than giving them an entire page of text, or maybe you give them the entire page of text, but you're going to give them another sheet of paper or something to cover up the vast majority. We're going to focus on one paragraph at a time. And when we're done with that paragraph, we're going to summarize that paragraph. That's called chunking, right? So instead of you trying to take on a whole page, we're going to do this one bit at a time. And when we're done, we're going to come back and we're going to summarize. Now, here's the deal. That can get old real quick because folks want to get to it. What are we reading? What are we doing? But if you're not reading and understanding what's going on, if the purpose is for you to be able to read independently, it's really helpful to check in with your students. And as they get better at this, you can give them more and more text. But chunking and small bits and coming back together. Well, what'd you read? What'd you think about it? Oh, wow. Have you experienced anything like this before? Have you seen this in any other text? That's really helpful, again, for the student grabbing hold to what they're reading. Avoiding assumptions about students and students' interests. Just because your students are a certain race and from a certain community doesn't mean that they're going to be interested in only reading about kids who look like them and have had the same or similar experience. You know, DJ talks about learning through, what is it, DJ? You said windows and doors and mirrors. What is it, DJ? Because I know I'm saying it wrong. What is it, DJ?
It's on the next slide, but you know, yeah, don't forward yet. But yeah, windows, mirrors, and doors.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. I knew I was getting it wrong, but you'd be surprised. Too often, especially when we're talking about equity, we want to see representations of ourselves in the stories. But the flip of that is sometimes we kind of pigeonhole kids into what we think they want to, we think they want to read, and we think they only want to see themselves. And I think what you will be surprised to know is lots of kids are really interested in learning about all kinds of experience, not just ones that look just like their own. So let me talk to your students or whoever is working with your kiddos, have them talk to those kids. What do you want to read? Why? Where have you seen
Simone,
before? Talk to them. You may be surprised at what is high interest text.
yeah. And Simone, I just want to,
I've said this 1,000 times and y'all on the phone.
Simone,
we're done.
Well, I just want to, I'm sorry. I just want to, because everything you're saying right now is so deeply connected to Jess and what he's going to share. And I just want to make sure we have time for him because we're already running out of time. So if you could just like take another minute to wrap up and then we'll give Jess the floor.
Yes, actually we can stop here.
Oh, great. Yeah, because I feel like this is like the perfect like preview for what Jess is
this
going
is perfect. I will shut my mouth right now. Unless DJ, I think we have one or two more slides. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we stop?
No, just like I said, you said it, books are windows, mirrors, and doorways. So, like I said, and these are just some great quotes. Like I said, that children, that when they find themselves in a book, that's really one of the optimal ways, but that doesn't mean that they can't also see themselves as, see these windows and doorways to new worlds. So, yep.
And you all will get these slides because they're chock full with good info. But I definitely want to turn it over to Jess because he's going to talk about putting all of this into action. So thank you so much, Simone and GJ and Jess, asking you to take it away.
Okay, let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about adolescent literacy and libraries. Libraries similar to OST spaces are not school, so we have an interesting opportunity to be creative in our approach, incorporating literacy in our adolescent programming. Next slide. Okay, so we are talking about multiple literacies. Obviously, literacy is based in reading and writing, print text. This is the foundation of literacy. We also want to acknowledge, especially for our adolescents, their lives are full of many forms of information. So literacy becomes a social act of participating in the world, which is also part of constructing meaning. So the goal of the library is to support our learners' development of all forms of literacy through relevant, high interest, learner-driven literacy enhancement environments. So literacy enhancement, I'll continue on that slide for a sec.
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
I thought I was hearing a transition.
Yeah, so we want to support learners' voluntary engagement with highly motivating, relevant, text-rich environments. We want to ignite learners' interests and excitement. We want to immerse them into literary activities to give them opportunities to practice reading and writing, as well as verbal literary skills. We want to recognize that we are not providing explicit instruction. Again, we're not a school space. And then we also want to recognize that adolescents, similar to adult learners with lower literacy, come to the table with a rich roster of skills and interests. And interested learners who are engaging intrinsically are often motivated to learn the necessary literacy skills to participate in interest-relevant activities. We want to be sparking and supporting lifelong learning. Okay, next slide. Okay, so here are some examples of literacy enhancement programs we offer at the San Francisco Public Library. We partner with 826, which is an organization that supports youth developing creative and expository writing. They have some chapters across the country, so if there's one near you, I really recommend partnering with them if possible. We also have Youth Speaks, which connects poetry, spoken word, written and spoken literacy in practice. They host poetry slams in our teen space at the library. And then I also want to highlight our Tween Winter Read, which is our youth winter reading program for ages 10 to 18. In that program, participants select their own reading materials as well as the library programs they would like to engage in, which is a good example of interest-motivated participation. Okay, next slide. Okay, so what does creating a text-rich environment look like? A library is a great partner. Your local library is probably your key partner in creating a text-rich environment in your OST space. We want to bring in as much a variety of text as possible. We want all of our text to be relevant to your learners' interests and their abilities. We want it to be text to be readily accessible in multiple formats. And we want learners to be able to choose what they read, what format they read in, and how to respond. So I have some examples of potential texts you can ask your library for. First, I do want to mention books called decodable books. These are designed to support explicit phonics instruction. If you have capacity for that at your OST space, I would recommend asking your local library if they have a decodable book collection. Decodable books are designed to encourage the sounding out of words. I have an example here of breaking down the word picnic following a decodable format. I also want to recommend that you ask about juvenile nonfiction. Even though these are designed for younger children, often they are rich with facts and vocabulary that you can match to your learner's interest. There's also collections called high-low, which stands for high interest level, low readability. Many young adult fiction books are considered high-low books. They might be action-based, they might be plot-driven, and really engaging to your learners. Okay. I also want to encourage incorporating alternate texts There are many, many forms of text in your learners' lives, including memes, song lyrics, recipes, even text-based street art. And if your learners are engaging with reading in this way, bring it into your space and incorporate it into any of your literacy activities. Okay, next slide. Okay, one of the examples I have from SFPL is an expanded book club model. So I have two examples here. The first is Silent Book Club, which is concurrent independent reading. This is a good model for social peer support for learners who are already reading independently. This model allows readers to select their own materials and then read for a set time based on reader capacity and ability, 20 minutes to an hour of silent reading. And then it includes a share out after the set reading time. So this incorporates a social model. They can be practicing describing what they're reading, and encourages reading comprehension. The other example I have is follows the next chapter format, which is concurrent but facilitated reading. So this is a good model for learners who are still learning to read. Readers would read at the same time. They'd read from the same section of text. And then after the reading segment, 20 minutes to an hour, the facilitator can model comprehension and engagement with open-ended questions. The facilitator can also introduce new vocabulary present in the text, and the group together can work to define the new vocabulary, work to break it down, whatever is supportive of your readers, wherever they're at ability-wise. Okay, next slide. Okay, so here are some examples of supportive reading techniques. These are tactics you can use during facilitated reading to model engaged, curious, fluent, and pleasurable reading practices. Since these slides are getting sent out, I won't go through all of them, but I do want to highlight echo reading. This is a great example for learners who might be struggling a bit more with reading. You as a tutor or the instructor would model expressive reading and pacing. You would read one sentence or a paragraph at a time based on your learner's ability, and then your learner would repeat back to you. I have a parrot on here just to remember. You'd be reading and your learner would be repeating back to you. You can also use audiobooks, and I would encourage you to borrow audiobooks for free from your library if that's a resource available to you, so that your learner can be practicing this on their own time also. Next slide. Okay, here's some additional examples of supportive reading techniques you could incorporate. Alternate reading is a great option for a group. It works well with any materials with dialogue, and it's an opportunity for your reader, for your learner to read out loud independently. So this works by reading aloud one sentence or paragraph at a time, and then asking your learner to read the next sentence or paragraph. And there's also a round table version of this where you go around the table and have every person read one sentence or paragraph and then pass on to the next person. Okay, next slide. Okay, here are some examples of comprehension questions we like to ask in library spaces that you can incorporate in your OST space. Curious questions can look like asking who or what or when or where or why questions after each section of reading. This is a good way to model building dialogic engagement with the text and being really inquisitive and curious as you're reading. Another example is asking personal stories questions. For example, have you experienced what is happening in this section? And then also I like this third option, a picture this activity. You can have each learner draw a scene from the section you read together, have them describe the image they drew to the group, and you can encourage other learners to ask questions or make comments about what they have drawn from the section you're reading about. Okay, next slide. Okay, we want our programs, especially for adolescents, to be interest-led and project-based.
I'm just going to interrupt you for 1 second. We only have 4 minutes left. So wondering if and these are really good dense slides, you guys. We will send them out to everyone. But I'm just wondering if Jess, you can just do like a really quick 1 minute highlight of to wrap up.
Yeah. So this is our last slide actually.
Oh, great. Okay.
So we want you to be incorporating literacy practices into your existing projects. And so here are some examples of how you could do that. You can incorporate reading and writing prompts into art practices, into performance practices, into creative class programs, and yeah, so a project-based learning opportunity supports learners' application of the concepts they already know into things they're already interested in. So this is a good example of how to incorporate all of that and support learner agency as they're learning throughout the rest of their lives. Okay, the final slide is some examples of what you can ask your library for. So I encourage you to come back to this slide and really think about how your local library can be supporting your specific community in your specific OST space. And then I do have an infographic from the public library section of NSLA that I sent to Emily to send out to you also. And this just has some prompts to continue thinking about how your library can be supporting you. Okay, that's what I've got.
Yes, thank you so much. That was like such a wealth of awesome ideas that all of you all can put into practice. And we did post a series of resources that Jess put together in the chat, as well as that infographic that he mentioned. So all of that's been posted in the chat. We will share it all tomorrow in a follow-up message. And we don't have time for Q&A, unfortunately, but I'm going to see if our awesome speakers would be willing to post their contact info in the chat so that you can follow up with them. Because we just want to get through, and we don't have time for this, but thanks to I know a couple of you have Already been posting in the Padlet, so thank you so much for doing that. We don't have time to do our usual peer exchange, but you all know that's usually part of this, where we get the chance to actually talk about your own experience with this. I'm sorry I'm rushing through now, but I know we said we were going to take 1 hour, so we don't want to take too much more of your time. I know some of you have already had to leave. Thank you so much to all 3 of our awesome speakers for sharing their contact info. So if you have questions for them, I expect Jess is going to get a lot of questions, so please feel free to reach out to them with your questions. So now I know Leslie is here from NSLA. They have this NSLA has this brand new awesome tool for you to use in your planning. So Leslie, if you're here, do you want to just say a few quick things about this?
Sure. Thanks, Emily. Some of you may be familiar with our old planning guide that we've had for a number of years. Summer starts in September. We have revamped it, put a new frame on it using the Clover model from Pear and Harvard University. And I put a link to it in the chat. So it's a great resource if you're planning your summer program. We're going to be doing a little bit of a tour of it around the country. So we'll be announcing some new dates that are coming up. We'll be in like New York and Michigan and Oakland, California, Texas, a couple other places. So we'll let you know when those are happening. We're also having our annual summer planning boot camp, which is going to be March 13th to the 14th. I also put a link for that in the chat as well. The registration link is on that webpage.
I'm just going to add it again right now, so you'll have it.
Yeah, so this is a free resource. We're going to be going over research, quality, staffing, all different kinds of areas, and it's a free 2-day webinar. So hopefully we'll see you there.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, really quickly. So as Abra mentioned earlier in the session, our next convening is actually going to be in person at their Housing Is. So I'm also going to post in the chat again. I know she already posted it, but the link to the registration for the Housing Is conference. And then just stay tuned for more information. We'll have a virtual meeting in the summer, and then one in summer, fall, and then another one in the fall, winter. And we'll wait to learn more about what NSLA is going to do with their annual summit. And then, what I always like to end on. So if anybody would be willing to either voice or post in the chat, I know we're already at 3 p.m., but if anybody would like to share something that you found most valuable about today's session. So I'd love to hear from you, or please feel free to post in the chat. And I'll say thank you so much to our awesome speakers. It was so cool to get the research from our awesome doctors from the universities, and then get Jess kind of saying this is exactly what it looks like on the ground and how it's been successful for him and successful for the teens he works with. So a big thank you to all of you for your participation. And would anybody like to share what they found most valuable about today's session, either in the chat or verbally, just to close us out? That's okay. I can let you all go. I know most people had to leave already too. So thank you, everybody. Again, we will send all the slides and the recording. Oh, thank you, Hannah. Actionable literacy strategies. That's awesome. I love it. I love it. I love it. So
The
you will get
reminder
all
of
the
self-care, the reminder of self-care hit me right in the chest, so I appreciate that.
Thank you, Broderick. That's Broderick from NSLA. Thank you so much, Broderick. Yes, that hit me too. All right. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. It was such a great conversation, and we will see you next time. Thank you again, Simone, DJ, and Jess. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. Have a good evening.